there, my name's Noreen Smith and I am a Creative Memories Advisor from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I'm happy to be here today to talk about some of the tips and tricks that I use when I'm working with photographic background papers. Now, the planes, trains, and automobiles paper pack from CM have beautiful pattern papers in them, and many of them have a photographic background on the reverse side. And these photographic papers, while beautiful, can be kind of tricky to work with. We don't always want to cover up the scene, we're not sure how to embellish them, and we're not even really sure what kind of photos or what kind of photo sizes will work with them. So I've got some tips that will maybe make it a little bit easier for you to reach for those papers and use them to create beautiful layouts. So my first tip I like to kind of call play and arrange. So I've got two photographic background papers from the Planes collection here, and you can see that we've got kind of these two different photos and then a border and then a larger field of more of a decorative paper. So they're not quite the same, but they're going to work together really well. And, you know, really what we first want to do is kind of figure out how we want to use them. You might think that this might be a great arrangement. I kind of like the idea of putting it, you know, one border on one side, one on the other. And I really like the way that that looks. So once I've played with my papers, I want to also play with the idea of where my photos would be. And I wanted to share this tip with you. For a long time, I have used scrap pieces of cardstock and I've cut them down to the same size as standard photos. And then I just write the size on them. So I have a lot of 4x6 ones, some smaller ones like 3x5, 4x4s, and then even smaller ones like 3.5 by 3.5, 3x3, and even little 2x3s. So I'm going to play around with these templates before I figure out exactly the way I want my photos to go. So after playing around a little bit, I really kind of liked this photo arrangement. I've got two 6x4s actually, standard size photos, but in the landscape format. And then I thought that this side really looked great with four 4x4s. So now I know exactly what size of photos I'm going to be wanting to use. And I went ahead and cut some down. These are photos of my family's trip to the USS Midway in San Diego. And so I went through my photos, was able to cut some of them down and then used some of them in the landscape format. So that was a really quick way to get those photos organized and make use of the photographic paper. I also went ahead and cut some photo mats in the same sizes because, of course, I want to be able to reuse these particular photo mats again and again when I need to figure out photo placement on other layouts, or even if I'm just fooling around and I'm trying to come up with some ideas. So make sure that you hang on to all of these little templates that you've created to use for other layouts. So now you can see that I have my photos on the gray mats. They're just kind of blending all together there. And all I'm going to have to do now is embellish it and add my journaling. Let's look at a photographic paper from the automobiles paper pack so I can tell you about my next tip. Now this paper from the automobiles paper pack is a little bit of a different type of photographic background. It very much has a realistic scene, so it's a little bit more tricky to work with. We can definitely put our photos up here, but we want to really make them work together with the scene. Now, I could take my photos and just try to kind of, you know, organize them up at the top here, but that doesn't really help me in any way to really reinforce that idea of the scene down here. So I like to kind of create a block of photos, and I'm going to use a couple of the 4x4s, and then I'm going to add a smaller one so that I get 3 photos on the page, but they're really contained in a little block. Then when I add my title in here, that will all be kind of intentional and not just scattered around the page. So now that I know where I want kind of my photo block to be, I've gone ahead and cut out my photo mats from the rich brown cardstock. and I've got my photos ready to just pop in here, something like this. Some photos of us on a road trip down to California, and that's going to be the map that we were using. So again, by grouping them all together in that area, we actually have a really nice intentional grouping. So my next tip is going to talk about some of the embellishments that we can use and how we can embellish with purpose. So let's have a look at the photographic papers from the Trains collection for that tip. So I've got two different pattern papers from the Trains paper pack, but when you turn them over, you actually see that they're pretty much the same photographic design, maybe a little bit different in the textures. But these two are going to work together really well. You could certainly put the different angles pieces up in the corners. You could turn them both around like this to have them both in the bottoms. There's lots of different ways. What I decided to do is kind of put them in the inside corners and have my title and then my journaling, and then put my photos in the fields there. But this diagonal pattern in the center here gave me an idea, and it's perfect to demonstrate my third tip for working with photographic paper backgrounds. And that is to embellish, to reinforce, or continue the scene. So this diagonal pattern here is perfect to add a set of train tracks to. Now I'm actually going to have to cut a second set, but I think you get the idea that I can punch another train track border and just add that on, and my train track will continue that diagonal focus. And then in terms of the photos, I was thinking I could do a couple of 4x6s. I could maybe do another larger photo, but maybe I might opt for some smaller photos there. And then maybe instead of doing all of them in the horizontal or landscape format, maybe I'll add in a 4x6 vertical photo. So I like that. And then maybe I will add some 4x4s, although that's going to be a little bit too large. So maybe I might rely on my 3x3s there, maybe even overlap them a little bit. Maybe I could get some more 3x3s in here. And then if I really cluster my photos together, then that makes way for my train track, which is going down the center kind of diagonally across both pages. I now have my photos down, and I've just matted them onto some black cardstock to match the black train tracks that I've created. And I did go ahead and punch a second track with the train tracks border punch. So those will just kind of butt up together like that to finish the train tracks, and I'll just have to trim off the excess. Now, in terms of that idea of embellishing to reinforce or continue the scene, I'm definitely going to want to continue the scene by adding some more of the fun die cuts here along this track. Okay, and I think I actually might even have room for one more photo. I'm going to sneak in there. I've got room for my journaling in here. As for my title, I could definitely use something like this. Travel is always a good idea. Or I could go ahead and choose something like welcome aboard. And then I definitely want to reinforce the theme without getting too crowded. So I might put things like the little conductor's hat and his stopwatch near the picture of the conductor. And you can see that my son is wearing a hat very much like that one. And then I think instead of adding, a bunch more embellishments that are really just going to kind of take away from that central focus, I might just add some of the small embellishments from the sticker pack. So again, by embellishing to reinforce the scene or continue the scene, those photographic papers work beautifully. I've gone back and added all my embellishments and journaling to my layouts. And so I just wanted to show you how they looked in the end and just remind you of our 3 tips. So remember that when we started this one, I gave you the tip of playing with the background pages to see your arrangement and using some paper photo templates to figure out exactly where your photos are going to go. That makes it super fast to get your photos onto the papers and then embellish them. My second tip was to work with the scene. So you remember we created a really intentional block of photos, and all I needed to do to finish this page was to use a die cut title, a little bit of journaling, and add one large embellishment down here that creates a nice diagonal sort of juxtaposition between the photos and the scene down here. It doesn't obscure the scene, and that's what we want because we really want this to be the star of the show. And then my final tip was to embellish, to reinforce or continue the scene from your photographic papers. So remember that we created this diagonal train track that really emphasizes the diagonals that were already on the photographic paper. And I used the blocks of solid color for my title and my journaling. And then really the embellishments just kind of fit in with the blocks of photo or that large train track. I love how this turned out, and I love that I was able to sneak an extra photo of my son in the caboose or the boxcar of the train. So I hope those tips have been helpful to you, and that maybe next time you look at one of the photographic papers, you'll remember some of these easy ways to really make your layouts with them fantastic. Thanks very much for joining me. Take care. Bye-bye for now.